Well, welcome everyone. I see it's just about 11 o'clock and we'll get started. As I've said in the past, we want to thank the Foundation of the Arts and Sciences for hosting these. I encourage people to support the foundation any way you can. Membership is always good. Donations are wonderful, but participating in the programs that they offer are a great way. It's kind of a win-win situation where you get to do something that's fun, interesting, enlightening, and you take advantage of programs that the foundation has put together. They're just going to be coming out with their catalog for the summer season shortly. They are accepting registrations for camp already. They have a great science camp for kids, and we hope to continue some of the various educational activities throughout the summer. You'll be hearing more about all those things. We want to thank Jenna and the rest of the staff at the foundation for putting these things together and participating, and they're all very helpful. So thanks to all of those. As we said before, everything is connected, and certainly generation of energy and alternates that are friendly to our environment are extremely important. So we are very fortunate today to have Ray Bukowski, who's the Managing Director of Governmental Relations, Communications, and Sustainability at New Jersey Resources. So he's going to give us some really great information today. He said he's going to be able to hang on for a little bit longer if some of you have questions at the end. And we can even go into some of the more technical issues. So if you've got some questions, don't hesitate to mention them. It's probably best if you put them in the chat section. That way we don't miss them. And you can pose a question during the chat, during the presentation, and then we can catch up with it at the end. And finally, just some little background about Ed. I've known him for a number of years. I gave you his title, which is a little bit long, but his background is truly unique. He spent nearly 30 years at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and there he served on a number of different leadership roles, including Assistant Commissioner of Natural and Historic Resources and Assistant Commissioner of Compliance and Enforcement. So he has a great deal of background and knowledge. But perhaps even more interesting is the fact that he is a graduate of Stockton College, so he's a local guy, is a fisherman and an outdoorsman, and ran some charter services. And so he's very involved with the environment as a resource and as a source of enjoyment, which I think all of us can really take advantage of, someone with his background and his experience. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ed. Or Ray.
Right.
Why do I keep saying
That's
that?
right.
Sorry, Ray.
All good. I appreciate it. And, good morning, everyone. So yeah, it's a long title. More recently, we've been kind of transitioning to just calling my group External Affairs, which makes a little bit more sense. As Rick shared, I have a pretty diverse background, which has made me very comfortable working for New Jersey Resources. We're a very diversified company. We take a diversified approach, and I think that's what you're going to hear most today. I'm not quite sure, and I don't want to play with screens, so I'm screen sharing, so I can't quite see who is on there. But I really want to just encourage everyone to ask questions, and we get to a point. If you have something, like Rick said, you can drop it in the chat. You can also raise your hand. You can turn your camera on and have a conversation. And we're relatively light right now, just 11 people. So I'd love to have dialogue. Any of you who are on, because I'm not looking at right now, who know me, I love to be able to talk and to debate issues. So I believe that the dialogue is really important. I talked to Rick and Jenna early on about when we scheduled this that I was going to try to provide a bit of an update coming out of last year, but I also don't want to assume that any of you listened into the presentation that I made last year. There are a few updates. I have a couple. I sat here last year, a little behind the scenes fact, I had a broken ankle at the time. So I'm fully healed, but I can move around if lighting is bad, a little bit easier than I could last year. I was a little bit stuck. And probably more notably, I'm hitting 55, so I'm going to throw on glasses in a second so I can actually see the screen a little bit better. So that's a bit of a personal update. Like Rick said, I have been involved in, utilizing, interacting with resources my entire personal life as well as my professional life, and really enjoy the fact that I've had the opportunity to work in and around this space with so many different people and gain different perspectives throughout. So I'll get into that a little bit more. Some of you who may have been on last year may recognize this photo. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We can circle back to this later, but this is actually a little bit of a prelude if you are new to this conversation. This is our green hydrogen production facility that's in Howell, Monmouth County, operating today. It's been up and running for a few years now. And so all the conversations about green hydrogen now that are a little bit more vogue, the company took a really forward looking, took a big leap years ago to start the planning of this project. And this project was actually running around the same time that I joined NJR 3 years ago. So this is a really wordy slide. Please do peruse it. I'll leave it up for a second. I'm not going to read it to you because then I'll get lost and won't know what else to say for the next 45, 50 minutes. But the summary of this is don't trade on anything that I'm talking about today. This is just a forward-looking statement to say, we are a publicly traded company. Nothing that I'm presenting has anything to do with investments or investment advice. Consult with your professionals, not this presentation. All right. So who are you talking to if I have not met you? Rick gave you a little bit of background. I'll just leave this up for a couple seconds. As Rick said, I'm an avid outdoorsman. I'm a surfer, fisherman, waterfowler. I shared with Rick and Jen and Caroline a few minutes ago that I actually was striped bass fishing yesterday. Maybe I'll go striped bass fishing this afternoon when we're done. I live for resources. Graduated of Stockton, and I've spent, a lot of my career at the DEP, and I've worked in a lot of different roles. From a lot of you I've probably met when I was the manager at Island Beach State Park or in one of my assistant commissioner roles, but I actually used to also be the coastal enforcement inspector in Long Beach Island for quite a while. That was back about 15 or 20 years ago. I think what's important here is that I really look at things from a really diverse perspective. I've run operations, police and fire. I've run operations from a revenue perspective, business development perspective from the Park Service, also being regulated. When I gained a lot of valuable experience when I had like Fish and Wildlife and Parks and Forestry, that I was regulated by the other sections of the department. So learned quite a bit there about interactions and how regulations really do get applied, not just from a regulatory perspective that I knew from permitting and enforcement, but also as a permittee, and bringing that experience into the position that I have now, where I have a pretty diverse plate, but I've got an incredible team that I work with every single day in a very progressive company. I'll transition to the company in just a second, but what is, you're going to hear throughout is diversity, diversity in applications, diversity in opportunities, diversity in perspectives, and balanced approach to everything. I've taken that, from a professional perspective, which you could probably check out there, and I apply it in my own personal views on all matters of resource management, and which also includes energy. So last year, I spent most of this session talking about New Jersey natural gas. I'll do that again because obviously it's first and foremost on a lot of people's minds, but I think it's really important for me to sort of level set where our company is and the diversity that we do bring to the plate. So I work for New Jersey Resources. New Jersey Resources is the parent company over multiple affiliates that are listed out on this slide. Obviously, New Jersey Natural Gas is our largest. Everybody sees that. Fun fact, when you skip down to the bottom one, the home services business, a lot of people see their trucks and immediately assume they're the same company. They're not. They're separate affiliates and regulated as such. So a gas company does not promote home services and vice versa. That does bring a lot of different perspectives, though, to the table when we start to talk about a lot of these issues that we're going to discuss today. Our second largest affiliate is Clean Energy Ventures. And I really want to highlight that here and use that to underpin a lot of what I'm talking about. Clean Energy Ventures is one of the largest owner-operators of commercial scale solar and renewable energy in New Jersey. So what I'm setting the table there for is to say, you will not hear us talk about an either or conversation or in and around energy, whether we're talking about natural gas or electricity or full electrification or anywhere in between. We vehemently support an all the above approach. And I think that there's deep credibility in that when you really just identify the fact that we have the largest renewable energy company that's operating in the state today. So most of our assets right now are in solar. The picture that is up there right now, that's a closed cap landfill in Mount Olive, New Jersey. It happens to be the largest solar array on a closed landfill in the country. This went into service last year. So this is an update from the presentation that I made last year in that, you know, we're taking brownfield sites, closed landfills, and turning them into renewable energy and making deep investments into that. I'm not going to read statistics on the side. You guys can see that for yourselves. But just in terms of talking about some of our diversity, we do and we are looking at investments into battery storage. We have built, owned, and operated terrestrial wind in the Midwest. After it was built, we did divest from it just based on a business decision for O&M reasons, but we have a pretty diverse palette of projects that we've worked on in the past, so and continue to. So we're not just solar. We're going to go look at all kinds of other opportunities, but I think what is most important here in the message that I'm trying to convey is that we are all in on renewable energy, and we do believe that it helps us balance our perspectives. Shifting over to New Jersey natural gas, the bottom line on this is that we are aligning with all of the state goals the best that we can. And my basic point that I want to make here is that all of our goals should be to achieve emission reduction. It shouldn't be about a choice of your energy delivery system. It should be about the net result. We should be looking at emission reduction wherever we can, and there are many, many different ways to do that. And we have to consider the infrastructures that are already in place, owned, operated, paid for by the ratepayers of New Jersey, so that things remain affordable. At a grand scale, when we're talking about the development and the deployment of additional capital expense from an infrastructure perspective, but also for ratepayers, everyday customers, because if it isn't affordable, you're not going to get adoption. If you don't get the adoption, you don't get the emission reduction. So I think everything that we need to do, we need to think about feasibility, costs, reliability. And I'm going to go into reliability a little bit deeper in a minute. But essentially what we're getting at here is, you know, trying to achieve a net zero emission profile in our future that aligns with the state goals, including increasing renewable energies, building sector emission reduction, transportation emissions reductions. And we have strategies that are over on the right-hand side of the slide that align with those. And I'll talk about those strategies a little bit more as we move ahead. It's a little bit more about the value of the infrastructure that is already in place and some facts that I don't think many people are fully aware of. And it's important to consider, especially when you think about, like I said, the affordability of everything for the entire state at a large economy-wide scale, and also as it applies to individual ratepayers. Sorry, give me one second. So we as ratepayers in the state, and this is across the entire state, all infrastructures and all of the LDCs, which are GDCs, which are GDC is a gas distribution company. So we're talking about PSE&G, New Jersey Natural, Elizabethtown Gas, South Jersey Gas. It cost about $17 billion to install all the underground infrastructure across the state so far. That was the investment that went out by ratepayers to put all the infrastructure to the ground. That is not today's price. You can imagine it's really hard to build infrastructure. It's really hard to build renewable energy. Go backwards for just a second, talk about some of the solar development that we have. We have an enormous pipeline of projects that we're looking to build out large commercial scale solar right now. It's very hard. It's hard to get, it's hard to build anything, whether it be BPU approvals because of costs, or DEP approvals, or PJM, which is our regional grid operator, to get connection approvals to get into the grid. All of those processes have deep value. So I'm absolutely recognizing that, but it is very difficult to build out. So therefore, when you start thinking about additional wires or pipes or generating opportunities, whether they be solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, battery storage, anything, it is a cumbersome process, and it's also very expensive. So 17 billion, if you put that into today's dollars, would be orders of magnitude higher, and I'm sure everybody could understand where I'm going with that. The other big thing, when you look across the country, there's a lot of conversations about clean heat standards and things like that in other states that are getting very aggressive on it. But you have to really look at what every single state or every single distribution system has in terms of opportunity or constraints. Every single system has its own strengths and weaknesses. One of the strengths that we have in New Jersey, not just the fact that we have infrastructure, but it's that we have deeply penetrated infrastructure. 73% of the buildings in New Jersey are connected to the systems. Therefore, if you leverage that opportunity to decarbonize the fuels that are flowing through that system and reducing the throughput to this system, you have a tremendous opportunity to reduce emissions. One of the key concepts there, I want to just kind of talk about this for just 1 minute, is, in New Jersey, we're decoupled. And what that means is that, the gas cost of the commodity on your bills is a pass-through cost. So we're agnostic about how much gas people use. There's a conception sometimes, and even myself as a regulator at DEP for 30 years, this wasn't really clear to me until I got here. The gas company it actually supports you to use less gas. We invest into using less gas. I talked about this last year with our Save Green program. All the utilities, including electric utilities, have energy efficiency programs that allow for significant investment by the company to support customers to use less energy. That is a very genuine goal that we all have. The less energy that we utilize, regardless of the type, whether it be gas or electric, the lower our emissions. So we make that investment, and it does not hurt us from a business perspective. That's the misnomer that, it could be commonly misunderstood, is that we want you to use less. We don't want you to use more. And then for me, where I come in, working with our strategy folks within the company, is the less gas that we have flowing through the system, there is less gas to decarbonize. So the total volume goes down, your emissions go down, and then if you look to the far right, compatible with lower carbon fuels, and in that we're talking about things like renewable natural gas or hydrogen, you have less gas to displace. Therefore, it's easier for us to achieve our emission reduction goals. Why is it critical? I think we all know this, and some of us, we're humans. We go through issues like we had with Superstorm Sandy, and then they kind of get a few years in the rearview mirror, and we kind of forget about how difficult it is. But there are realities of our existing infrastructures, and we need to be concerned about reliability. Hear conversations about the reliability and are we going to have enough renewable energy to supply the grid to power our electric vehicles or replace heat pumps. And that's a difficult conversation. It's a difficult concept to even consider, but it's not just a 1-for-1. You have to think about peaking for the maximum amount of energy delivery that is needed for the coldest day of the year. And I think December of 22 last year around Christmas is the most recent warning that, we really have to be considerate of what those peak needs are. So if you were to build out an entire portfolio that was only electric for the state, you'd have to triple the amount of electricity that is going to be produced in order to meet a peak demand. And that doesn't really account for, storage of that energy. That's just simply the generation capacity that we have today. So that's an awful lot of energy. And, we have a vested interest in trying to provide some of that through our company, but it's a very tall order. So I think it's really important when we start thinking about grid. What does grid readiness mean? There's a lot of conversation in the legislature this week about grid readiness. It's not about getting generation to to the transport system. It's about taking it from the transport system all the way down to the neighborhoods in our homes. You know, if you lose power more often than not, but your heat is associated with that as well, I think it just makes sense to talk about, you know, how you can diversify your energy supply, and then therefore, you know, you have more reliability in your home moving forward. This is a little bit deeper look at that and how it is, you know, taking it from the home level and then through some of our critical infrastructure. These three counties that are on the slide here are just New Jersey Natural Gas's primary three counties. We have facility assets and do supply service to a portion of Burlington County, Sussex. So it goes a little bit beyond this, but these three primary counties alone, there are, you know, 1,500 plus or minus critical infrastructure facilities that are identified. Those facilities are identified by the Office of Emergency Management. We didn't identify them. And, you know, we are talking about hospitals, and we're talking about emergency services. We're talking about our wastewater treatment plants. Not having power to those facilities is simply unacceptable. So therefore, primary and backup power that is diversified is really important. And kind of wearing my old DEP hat, you know, we have to be considerate of the fact that even some of these facilities that are on this, they can even be curtailed from gas in times of, you know, supply shortages. So some of those facilities, even some of the hospitals, their backup emergency generators run on diesel. So if you look at the emission profile of if you electrify the facility, but then you have to go to the backup and generate from diesel, the emission profile from the facility actually goes up. Isaias, tropical storm Isaias a couple of years ago, we actually saw a record send out of gas in a relatively warm period, and it was because of all the emergency generators that were firing at that time off of natural gas. So I'm talking about home Generacs. That'll continue to occur because, you know, what's not even included in there is the refrigeration units at all of our supermarkets and everywhere else that they're all associated with electric supply. So as we increase the amount of electric load from heating and vehicles, we have to be concerned about the generation, transport, and distribution of that energy. And diversifying helps to protect you against those winter peaking shifts, as well as, you know, maintaining all this infrastructure and keeping emissions low. So let me just talk a little bit about last year. I had a couple more technical slides, but I wanted to touch on this since I've mentioned cleaner fuels a couple of times. I mentioned earlier that, you know, we've been running a green hydrogen facility in Howell for a few years. That system does blend low percentages of hydrogen into our distribution system in southern Monmouth County. Today, we've had absolutely no impacts whatsoever from a performance standard for anybody's appliances. Our blend rates are incredibly low because we just wanted to gain knowledge, and we do share this knowledge. We've given dozens, and I mean, when I say dozens, I mean we're way over 50, 60 tours now to regulators, as well as stakeholder groups, as well as our peer utilities from around the country. We've had utilities. I actually was part of a tour. We had a delegation from Toho Gas in Japan over to see our facility just about a month ago. And we exchanged a lot of information on technologies that are available now and also coming to fruition and development of new nascent technologies that are going to help us to decarbonize even deeper. That effort continues, and we are very open about our experiences and lessons learned on hydrogen production and hydrogen blending so that we can help as many utilities as possible to reduce emissions where it is appropriate. There's a lot of conversations about hydrogen and whether or not, you know, can you transport it through the system? Doesn't it leak out of pipes? And the truth is it can under certain circumstances. But I had mentioned earlier that you really have to consider the infrastructure of every individual system that you're working with. Opportunities are different. In New Jersey Natural Gas's territory, and I'll actually help out and mention that, South Jersey Gas's system is almost along with ours. We had the opportunity, based upon the age of our society and access, that over the past 10 years, we've done a really aggressive pipeline replacement program and replaced all the cast iron in our system. So in our service territory, we don't have any cast iron, zero. So therefore, we're talking about protected steel, which is lined steel, and plastic, high density polyethylene that you probably see coming into your house. So it's plastic. Especially under the lower pressures that we're talking about at the end of the distribution system, hydrogen does not leak out. And we are talking about lower blend rates, but there is an awful lot of information around the globe suggesting that blend rates can be higher. We're talking about ours is blending 1 to 2, maybe on the lowest throughput days in the summer we might hit 3, because we're just doing a very, very small amount for gaining knowledge. Hawaii Gas they don't blend hydrogen into their system because on the island they refine crude oil for the entire economy on the island. Part of that process, if you don't know anything about petroleum distillation, which back in my early days in the 90s, I did lots of inspections at refineries. The highest end of that distribution column, you do end up with methane. So they started to distribute the methane around the islands in the 70s because it was there. And as part of that, they realized that as part of that process, there was hydrogen within the gas. So right now, they've been distributing between 12 and 15% hydrogen for 50 years with no ill effects. And I've gotten to know some colleagues. I mentioned earlier, I'm a surfer. I'm waiting for an invite. I haven't been invited yet, but become very friendly with some colleagues from Hawaii Gas who've said to me openly, like, wow, nobody cared about what we were doing until the last couple of years. Now, all of a sudden, we're the cool kids and everyone wants to talk about our experience with hydrogen because it's become much more mainstream in terms of conversations. But there are a lot of opportunities. I did make a promise that I would talk a little bit about updates on our strategies from last year. So I'll just mention at this point that we are moving toward several hydrogen projects. A lot of this is you can read more detail in our sustainability report. I'll drop a link unless Jenna, you want to find that and drop it in the chat. That would be great. New Jersey Resources Sustainability. You go to our website, you can find a link to our sustainability report and all like our latest projects, and what we were doing from a sustainability perspective is out and publicly available. So I encourage everybody to take a look if you have an interest. But as part of our next round of projects with hydrogen, we really want to be mindful of resources and resource management. So we're working with the Adlinger Center for Energy Studies at Princeton. So Princeton University has partnered with us to really look deeply at technical capabilities to recoup and provide sustainable clean energy and sustainable renewable energies from wastewater treatment plants. We're in conversations with several around our service territory. I can't get into details of who they are, but we're talking about, recapturing methane from the wastewater treatment facilities while also utilizing some of the wastewater effluent to produce clean hydrogen so that we can maximize the amount of renewable energy that we get from our waste services that are essential to our society. With that,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you just mention that link one more time? I want to make sure that I'm linking the correct one.
Sure. It's our 2023 sustainability report. There should be a link on NJR's sustainability website. If you can't find it readily, let me know if you can't get it, Jen. I'll dig it up later and drop it in the chat when we're talking and I have the screen down.
Great, thanks.
Sure. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, so and there are just several of us on here. So if you'd like to interject another question or comment, please feel free. But I just mentioned RNG as well as hydrogen from a wastewater treatment plant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about RNG more broadly now. A lot of conversation around RNG, but here's the bottom line. That guy, again, reflecting on my time at the DEP, we tightly regulate waste services, in the environmental sector, and for good reason. But those services are essential. I mean, in my opinion, and I spent a long time like working with the water program, which is NIGIPTs for those of you who are familiar, regulating the effluent standards that come out of a wastewater treatment facility. But let me throw a bone to those folks. If we didn't have wastewater treatment facilities cleaning our wastewater, they are essential environmental services. We're talking about every wastewater treatment facility in our state producing millions of gallons of water that we all utilize every single day. And so they are the essence of environmental improvement and environmental projects. I firmly believe that the more that we can do to recoup energies, which also translates to revenues for those facilities, improves their operations. We can improve their operations and make them more cost effective and more cost efficient, then we have a net benefit to where those waters are discharged to surface waters. And in coastal New Jersey, they are all going to coastal water bodies in one way, shape, or form. They all vary a little bit, but they are all going to our coastal waters. So therefore, the cleaner they are, the better off they are, the more they can operate, the more efficiently they can operate, cost effectively operate, the better off we are as a society, especially as we become more and more populated. So that is not going to go away, nor is solid waste. I am all for separation of waste streams. I believe that you can minimize organics that go to a landfill, but the cold hard reality is that we produce as humans plenty of solid waste, and the decomposition of any organic matter is going to release carbon in the form of CO2, carbon dioxide, and or methane, and or carbon monoxide, depending on the situation. But every compost pile in our yard, which is a great thing, is going to have an emission because that's just part of the natural process. And I think that it's imperative to think about, can we sustainably use those sources of emissions for renewable fuels? It's just a sensible, sustainable thing to consider in the right application. And ultimately, where it comes into the gas supply side of things from a gas utility perspective is every molecule of gas that we can produce, whether it's hydrogen or renewable natural gas, locally from localized emission sources will displace a molecule of fossil derived or geologically derived natural gas. So over time, as I said earlier, we bring our supply side and our demand side down because of energy efficiencies, and we replace fossil gases with more renewable, sustainable net reduction of gas by displacing the amount of fossil gas we have, then ultimately our emissions across economy-wide are lower and airshed, because climate is a global issue. It's not a local issue. But we do have to be considering local effects. So if you can collect what is right now emission sources at these localized point sources, you'll reduce the amount of impacts in and around the facility from an emissions perspective and displace the need for geologically derived gas from upstream in the system. And therefore, on an equalized basis, you're going to reduce the emissions by 50% from that region. So I think it's a really good opportunity. There are questions about scalability. And I just would think, especially with this group, is to think about organic waste across the board. If you're talking about wastewater, you're talking about solid waste, you talk about food waste, and even you look at vegetative waste and the amount of organic material that we have at our recycling yards around our areas, which is a great thing. It's absolutely a great thing to utilize those materials instead of having them in a landfill. But even those sources are going to produce emissions. Piles of wood chips decompose and it will produce emissions. So therefore, the more that we can utilize, I think the better off that we are as a society and think about things more holistically and economy-wide. So that was a little bit of a deep dive into some of those other issues. And then finally, while I'm on this page, I wanted to talk a little bit about, deeper concepts on some of the things around here, like hybrid heat, which is essentially energy efficiency optimized and put on steroids, along with carbon capture. So let me talk about carbon capture for a second. In a broad sense, there's even commercials now. ExxonMobil, has some commercials out talking about carbon capture and underground storage, CCUS, people call it. Great. Localized, are we talking about CCUS right now? No. But what we are talking about is capturing emissions from local emission sources and putting them to a solid form so that they can be put into durable products and reusable products so that we can interrupt the carbon cycle. And I think, being this is Science Saturday, let's go back to some of the basics. We have water cycles in our world, and we also have carbon cycles in our world. So taking that carbon cycle and disrupting that a bit, and we talk all the time about sequestering carbon in vegetative material through forest management projects and wetland restorations, which excite me, and I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. That is of great personal interest to me. But at the same time, you can put a lot of things into durable products and disrupt the process. So what am I getting at? It's questioned all the time whether or not carbon capture is real at a small scale. Well, it is. And if you think about it, analogy wise, like I said, I spent a long time in the air pollution control program at DEP. Emission controls have been in place for decades, for different emissions. And I'm talking about, even a bag house or a cyclone on the side of a school for their wood shop. Everybody's seen them. That's an air pollution control device. That's a very old technology, been around for a long time, and it reduces the amount of particulates that go out. There's scrubber systems that, put caustic solution through and reduce different pollutants, particularly VOCs or, what have you, from industrial sources. The same technologies can be applied to reduce carbon emissions at a localized level. And to put some facts around that, there's been a lot of talk about carbon capture at a smaller scale. But one more analogy. Think about all of our cars, and it's not new technology. We've had catalytic converters on cars for decades. That's an emission control device. So all those analogies already exist. It's a matter of what do you do with it. And I know, there's a lot of talk about catalytic converters and, the metals that are within them and everything else. And I get all that, but I'm just forming an analogy here that technologies do develop to be able to take care of some of these things. And when it comes to we call it distributed carbon capture for end uses, it's not a nascent technology. It actually exists. We have 2 units that are actually right now being installed in our corporate headquarters in Wall, Monmouth County, that are going to remove carbon emissions from our HVAC system, our boiler within our facility. And we figured who better to lean in first and install these than us. So it gives us this opportunity to, again, share knowledge around. There'll be more information about that. We'll be looking at some, doing a press release relatively soon. But the units are available. They're commercially available. It's about the size of a refrigerator. And it removes, different generations of the unit will remove different percentages of the carbon from the flue gas, and combine it with to produce with potassium to produce what's called a potash, which is potassium based, obviously. That material comes out as basically a powder. That powder can, the company that we're working with right now, they actually take that powder, this potash back, and they produce soap. Yes, bar of soap that you wash with. If we're talking about scale, we in New Jersey have very deep commitments to decarbonizing building products.
It sounds like maybe we just lost Ray. I don't know, Ray, if you can hear me, but we can't hear you.
It does look like his screen might have froze. Ray, if you're able to hear me. Oh, that's what I was just about to suggest.
Maybe while we wait for Ray to come back, I could talk a little bit about the SciStarter page, if that works for everybody.
That'd be great, Caroline.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes. Caroline, thank you very
Yay!
much. By the way, everybody, this is Caroline Nickerson. She's sort of the stand-in for Darlene, who's gallivanting around Thailand, I think, or something. But yeah, let's fill a minute or two with what you've got to say.
For sure. And yeah, hello everybody. I'm Caroline from SciStarter. So SciStarter is the world's biggest citizen science organization. And our founder, Darlene, is actually based at Long Beach Island. So I know this series in particular is very close to her heart, and she really enjoys it. And I've been really loving it too these past few weeks. This is awesome. But if you go to that link I put in the chat, scistarter.org/LBIF-Science Saturday, you can find all sorts of different citizen science projects you can do. Citizen science is any way a member of the public meaningfully advances scientific research. Usually it's by collecting or analyzing data for these ongoing research projects. It could be for an astronomy project. It can be for an environmental project. You can, take water quality measurements, figure out if the water's safe. Or you could take pictures of different plants and animals and monitor their species distribution. Are there even health-related citizen science projects out there where you can classify blood vessels for Alzheimer's researchers just by playing an online game? The list really goes on and on. But the projects that we have on this page really, I think, resonate well with LBI. We have some great environmental projects, and I think in relevance to Ray's presentation, as we have these big infrastructure changes, monitoring the environment is more important than ever as we pursue renewable energy solutions to understand, how are the birds doing? What's going on? Ray mentioned extreme weather events. You can monitor those through citizen science because climate change is hyper local. It's not global warming, it's global weirding, right? So understanding all the granularities of climate change through citizen science, through collecting data, or even just taking pictures of climate impacts with your smartphone is huge and very important. So I encourage you all to explore that microsite there and explore the Wire SciStarter website. And with citizen science, you can turn your curiosity about the world into real scientific impact. So thanks for having me here, and I hope you all enjoy that microsite.
Great. And one of the things that I want to remind everybody, the links that we talk about will be posted out at the foundation's website. So if you go to lbifoundation.org/science or click on the science tab, then you can scroll down, see all the speakers, and we do have the recording of their presentation, their slides, and then any of the links that are related to their talk. And one of the things that we talked about last year when Ray gave his talk, and I'll remind people of, that he was talking about every molecule. Well, I just want to talk about every kilowatt hour of energy saved is one we don't have to produce. So sometimes we overlook the simplest solutions, which are conservation. And I've long lamented that it seems as though we just don't spend enough time on conserving things, which has such a huge impact, conserving the use of plastic, for example, let alone fossil fuel, and let alone things like electricity. So I know that there are some pretty interesting projects available from the various energy producers about energy conservation. And I think later on, probably at the end of the summer, we'll invite Ray back. And by then we'll have some, and maybe some of you will have started to look at the conservation part of this equation. So let's see if we've got Ray back. Boy, it must have been like a catastrophic outage. I'm imagining that Jen is maybe
it
trying
looks
to.
like he's just, let's see, he just entered the waiting room.
Yeah.
Ray, you may have to switch that audio setting again for your headphones.
Hey, Rick, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. I
All
see your
right.
smiling face, or maybe not so smiling face. Don't know what happened to you there.
I don't either, and I apologize. And my computer is locked up, so I just joined by phone, so I'm not going to be able to share the screen, but I have only I'll continue to talk to you guys, and I will work on trying to get this thing reloaded. Just give me a minute. But I'll continue because I only had one more slide. That additional slide was really only going to be talking about some of our sustainability efforts as they relate to our stewardship program that I mentioned last year. So we'll share more information, I think, after this conversation about our coastal climate initiative. I mentioned it last year, and I believe that Angela Anderson, my good friend, who, for the record, for this group, Angela and I went to college together, so we've known each other for quite a long time. We're working together on a project that we're funding through our CCI program. So last year I mentioned CCI. CCI, Coastal Climate Initiative, got started a few years ago where the company had a partnership with TNC that remains in place today. And we were taking customer-based donations, and the company was matching those donations dollar for dollar, where we were making investments into working with TNC on Bay Island Initiative projects in and around Barnegat Bay. Near and dear to my heart. It got started before I got here, but it was something that really gave me a lot of comfort when I joined the company, because it was an easy place for me to really make some headway and align with the objectives of the company, since it's been a desire of mine in my personal and professional life forever. Last year, I kind of talked about it here, that we wanted to really expand that program significantly. So one of my colleagues who I work with every day, and some of you may have met, and if you haven't yet, I'm going to be anxious to make an introduction. Her name is Catherine, or Katie Feary. She's our Director of Sustainability. We put together an expanded program, and we've gotten our leadership complete total support from them, so that we are actually provided a substantial amount of funding over the next 5 years, $2 million, to do direct project support in and around our ecosystems, to provide ecosystem services, resilience, education in and around those projects for community involvement. And it is intersected with our community relations program, which is also part of my family of programs in external affairs. So we actually utilize our charity to augment and expand educational opportunities in and around ecosystem services and coastal resilience. And since last year, I know that Angela mentioned it last week, we have made a commitment through the Urban Coast Institute at Monmouth University to provide some funding for the Clam Cove Restoration Project down at Holgate. We're really excited about that. We had the opportunity to work with Rick and his colleagues at Reclaim the Bay to do an oyster shell bagging project at Mordecai. That one, we can deploy volunteers and bring them there. That's fantastic. We worked with the Natural Resource Education Foundation over at the Lighthouse Center last summer. We did 2 days with them, with 100 employees each day, working on the infrastructure of the old lighthouse camp to be able to help with publicly facing education programs, as well as bring resources to bear for the wetland edge restoration and beach restoration at the eastern end of the property. Further, we committed a 5-year agreement to work with New Jersey Audubon to help steward the Hovdanian Sanctuary in Berkeley, up at the top of the bay, just west of South Toms River. Significant piece of property. And what I'm trying to highlight there is we're really cognizant of the connectedness between our upland regimes through our watersheds to our coastal waters, to think about resilience, saltwater intrusion, making sure that we can help and support our nonprofit partners in and around the entire region in their efforts to improve those situations. So really excited about that. And anybody who's in that space, I would really encourage you to reach out to myself or Katie to have a conversation if you're part of another group and we can do something to work together and to support you. We would love to be able to do that. And I think with that, since we're about 10 of 12, I'll slow down. I have not gotten my computer to unfreeze. It is stuck. But I'm happy. So because of that, I'm going to need Rick and Jenna to kind of help me facilitate questions because I can't read the chat.
Yeah, that's okay. We can certainly do that. And this is perfect timing. You gave us so many things to be thinking about. And I'm happy to report there, although this is a small group, there's many people on the end as there were on the beginning. So I always consider that an A. So, and I'm just going to throw in a thought, maybe Caroline's looking at some of the chat questions, but here's a thought. Ray did mention to me before we got started that he'd be happy to come back later in the year, into the summer, into the fall. And I think he can give us some of the updates. And some of the things that I would like people to think about is he was talking about alternate energy and the impact. And it isn't just conservation, and it isn't just looking at other energy sources. It's, again, as he talks about, all of the above. One of the things that I must say is a little disappointing is when I hear all the furor for those who are in favor of, let's say, windmills, and those who are perhaps against windmills, where are they when we have presentations about energy conservation, alternate energies? Because it's a whole blend. And I really think whether you're for or whether you're against, you should really be understanding what some of the dynamics are and what some of the alternatives are. And I'll kind of throw out the same thing. We hear all these people are all worried about the right whales. Well, where are they when we have Rutgers or Stockton talking about oceanography and the impact of all the creatures in the ocean? So those of you who have friends for or against windmills are just one topic, but it's how are we using our environment and how can we do a better job, whatever the solution is. The more people that know what the options are, the better we're going to reach into the solutions. And so that's why, Ray, I really commend what you're doing and what New Jersey Resources is doing, looking at the variety of them. I'm going to just say one more kind of a shout out. One of the unsung heroes of Sandy was the gas company, was New Jersey Natural Gas. I live on Long Beach Island. They had to disconnect every single house, because you may remember what happened in Rockaways when the houses caught fire because of the gas. Not only did they have to disconnect them, but they had to reconnect them. Now, since I live down there and gas is not only what I cook with, but many people heat with, they needed to reconnect all those. And I don't know how they did it, but it was less than 2 weeks, they had reconnected all of those gas things on LBI. So when Ray was talking about resilience of the infrastructure, and you've got the electrical infrastructure and all the wires and all this and that, we see that because we see the wires up on the poles. We don't see what's underneath us, and we see the electric crews tending the service of electricity. We don't see all those taking care of gas, and so I never want to overlook that, because it really impacted my life and many of the others on LBI, that gas was there when we needed it, and it was through yeoman service of hundreds of thousands, thousands anyhow, of people. But I digress. Okay, some questions. Caroline, you've been taking a look at those. I think you came up with a good one. You can start with that one, I guess.
Sure. I don't know if y'all can hear me okay, but my question is, what's the best way for a member of the public to get involved in renewable energy solutions?
Well, Caroline, I'll be honest with you, I think that's a very, very broad question. I think that, starting right here, just listening to some of the opportunities that exist and understanding some of not only the opportunities to produce renewable energy, but also understanding what some of the balance is. I mean, there's a cause and effect to everything, and there's an impact to absolutely everything. And I know that from 30 years of working in environmental regulation. We got to think about cause and effect all the time. So therefore, really a balancing of all those issues and thinking about what the affordability is, which affordability relates to feasibility. But I think that being involved, through all of these groups and have a broader understanding and maybe just an open-mindedness to think about what the different opportunities there are and that exist, and taking a more diversified approach is most important. from an investment perspective, I'm talking about investment of your time, like to be involved. I think it's really important for the groups, or even for some of our colleagues in academia, to talk about, a broad array and get involved with having a deeper conversation about what those opportunities are and understanding them a little bit more deeply. Because it is difficult to be involved in the industry. Like, if you ask me, what are the opportunities to be involved? I think it is through the groups that exist, and whether they be educationally based, like LBI Foundation, or even some of the environmental groups, and having a deeper conversation to interact with the stakeholders. And if there are these groups that want to have a deeper conversation, I mean, I know for myself, I'm all for it. I will take an invitation anytime and come and sit down and talk to you guys, whether it's in person over a cup of coffee, or a speaking engagement like this. And I venture to guess most of my colleagues in the other companies would do the exact same thing.
Cool. All right. I don't see any other burning issues out there. And so, as I say, everybody that signed on is still on. And with that, we're going to close precisely at the stroke of noon. We try and work on a schedule and keep everybody to the schedule. And this has been very informative. And I really appreciate people taking the time, those of you who did. And maybe we, as I say, can do this again in the fall and bring people up to date, and then perhaps focus on exactly what is being done and what are some of the places where people can learn more and participate more. So with that, I think I'll thank everybody. And again, thank the foundation for hosting this. And we'll see you all next week at 11 o'clock.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
everyone.
Thanks, Ray.
See you
Thank
guys.
you,
Thank
Rick,
you.
Caroline, and Ray. Great presentation.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody, for staying on during that brief hiccup. Have a great
Yes.
weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.